First of all, I would like to thank the Coalition for organizing this event. I'll be rather short. I'll say first a few things about why the EU considers public procurement to be such an important issue. Then I'll go shortly into the rules that we have for public procurement, followed by how we see the situation in Serbia, and then I'll conclude with a few words on the new draft law. So, as you know, public procurement is really a very essential part of the so-called acquis, that's the legislative framework that the EU has in the area of free movement of goods. And why is it so? First of all, because of the huge sums of money that are involved in the EU. All member states spend every year billions and billions of taxpayers' money on public procurement. So it is absolutely essential that this money is well spent, especially now, of course, when we have the financial crisis. We do not want a waste of taxpayers' money. We don't want prices that result from public procurement processes to be too high, resulting in lower quality as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, the competition element in public procurement. As it involves such high amounts of money, it is all the more important that there is a level playing field between firms that can actually bid on an equal basis, that have equal access to information, which then also would result in a lower price. So the more firms that bid, the higher the chances are that the price will be lower. And then, as the previous speaker already mentioned, corruption is also a very big issue, also in the EU. So it goes without saying that also from this angle we have very much attention for public procurement processes going on in the European Union. What are the rules? I'll go over them in a very general way because they're very detailed. There are various directives dealing with public procurement. But basically they're all based on the principles of transparency, equal treatment between firms, and non-discrimination. So there are specific rules for public contracts for works, services, supplies, utilities, but also, for example, in the area of defense and security. And these rules mainly deal with the coverage of contracting entities and contracts, but also with the application of thresholds and specific exclusions in the area of public procurement. In addition, we have specific rules on review procedures and also on the availability of the necessary remedies. When there are wrongdoings and they are discovered, then of course there should be legal recourse for companies that felt that they have been put in a disadvantaged situation. Maybe also worth mentioning is that we are currently working on a new directive. We hope to be able to adopt it by the end of this year. And I think in this respect, it is also worth mentioning that directives and regulations are one thing of the acquis. Implementation is another, but it's equally important, of course. And this then also requires the necessary capacity, both in budget organizations that involve themselves in public procurement, but also in controlling bodies, in bodies that deal with complaints inside the Ministry of Finance. And I will come back to that later when I talk about the situation in Serbia. Turning now to this situation, well, what are a few of the characteristics? As already mentioned before, the sum of irregularities in Serbia is quite high. The state audit institution in the beginning of this year found that for the year of 2010 there were some 800 million euros of irregularities that it discovered based on only a limited sample of actual public procurement processes monitored. And this is quite a high number. This stems from various procedures, so it's the total sum of irregularities, not linked to one procedure in particular. But 800 million is quite a lot if you consider that the annual total envelope of public procurement in Serbia is about 3 to 4 billion euros per year. One procedure that we are particularly worried about is the so-called urgent procedure, where we have seen, especially in the last half a year, a very big increase in the usage of this procedure. When you realize that in 2011 the irregularities as found by the Public Procurement Office in this procedure amounted to 24 million, and only in the first half of this year the irregularities in applying this procedure amounted to 68 million, you realize that this is a huge increase. And this is especially the implementation of the law, I think, which is an issue in this respect. One other alarming trend is the reduction in the level of competition in public procurement in Serbia. In 2003, the average number of bidders was around 8 per public procurement tender, and this had dropped in 2010 to 3. So you see a steady decline in the number of companies that actually bid for a public tender. And this, of course, is likely to result in higher prices and perhaps also lower quality. About the present law, I will be quite short because we have been sent it last week by the Speaker of the Parliament and we are still assessing it. Our colleagues in Brussels are still looking at it. We have been sent already informal comments by our technical assistance team here in Belgrade, but also by colleagues from the OECD, the so-called Sigma project, which is financed by the European Union. And in general, they are quite positive about the law. So they feel that it's a step in the right direction of further alignment with the EU acquis. I just heard that probably, as it was mentioned by the Speaker of the Parliament, a bit more time will be taken for the assessment of this law, and I fully agree with the Coalition that this is a good way to consult all the relevant stakeholders on the new draft law. When I said it's a step in the right direction, there are still some areas for improvement. I'll be very general about them because I'm still waiting for more detailed comments. But these refer, for example, to more alignment with our rules in the area of concessions, utilities, and, for example, the definition of procuring entities. One issue which I would also like to give the Parliament into consideration when adopting this law is that when the so-called Stabilization and Association Agreement will be ratified by the EU, we have only one member state left whose parliament still has to ratify it, which can be done quite quickly, hopefully beginning of next year. Then, within 5 years' time, after the entry into force of this Stabilization and Association Agreement, the so-called domestic preferences should be brought in line with the EU acquis, so they should be gradually phased out. At present, Serbia can still, public organizations in Serbia involved in public procurement processes can still treat domestic Serbian firms in a privileged way with regard, as compared to EU firms. As mentioned, this should be gradually phased out. We can expect that next year the Stabilization and Association Agreement will be ratified. So rather than having to change the law twice, now and maybe next year, it might be good to already put this clause in the present law. When I speak about the law and the adoption of the new law, I think it's important to underline that equally important, if not more, is actually the right implementation. And here I think we can already make a lot of efficiency gains for which actually no changes in the law are required. These are mentioned, most of them at least, in the public procurement strategy that was adopted last year. And they refer once again to the right application of the urgent procedure to reduce corruption, but also, for example, to the right training of public procurement officials to already at an early stage make it possible for them to detect possible wrongdoings or suspicions of bid riggings, for example. And then also strengthening internal and external audit capacities. Well, I've herewith come to the end of my, my short presentation. I would only like to stress that the EU, of course, remains very much at the service of both the Parliament and the government to help improve the quality of the law through our technical assistance, our Sigma colleagues, and through our services in Brussels. Thank you very much.